Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's podcast, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this episode on all 3 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe to the Five Pillars YouTube channel. Today's guest is the first Member of Parliament to join us on the Blood Brothers podcast. He has an illustrious political background, namely in the anti-war front. He was a Labour MP in Glasgow, Hillhead and Kelvin, then a Respect Party MP for Bethnal Green and Bow, and then Bradford West, and currently in a nationwide discussed by-election. He is currently the MP of Rochdale and the leader of the Workers' Party. That is the author, the politician and the broadcaster, George Galloway.
Very nice to see you, brother.
We meet after many years.
Many years of knowing each other across the airwaves.
A lot's been happening, but you've had an eventful 4 months.
My goodness, yes. But on the foregoing, events move on. Differences are healed. People depart and come back together. And they come back together in the face of great events. Not good ones, but great events, big events. And the biggest of all is Gaza. And now is the time, surely, for all of us to come together in defense of the Palestinian people under genocide. And I'm hoping that that's the spirit, not just in which this interview can be conducted, but the spirit in which this election campaign can be fought. After all, we all have differences with each other, but none of us are murdering Palestinians in Gaza. And all of us ought to be standing up against it. So yes, 2024 has been an eventful year, even in a lifetime of eventful years for me. I spent 54 days exactly in the Parliament that has just been dissolved. Mm-hmm. I'm bound to say that in the 9 years since I left it, it hasn't grown any greater. The figures in it are miniature versions of the parliaments that I've been in before. When I was elected in 1987, there was 100 people in there that you would make you turn your head if they passed you in the corridor. They were men and women of independent mind. You didn't know what they were going to say when they rose to their feet, but you wanted to come in and hear what they had to say. None of these things are any longer true. It is, if it's politically correct to say so, a pygmy parliament. And I mean intellectually, ideologically, and in terms of the basic attributes of being a parliamentarian, of being able to speak without a sheaf of notes in front of your nose, being able to say more than your own name extemporary. It is an extraordinary business that even people on the front benches, and the 2 front benches are not far apart, and I don't just mean in distance, that they are of such limited quality. And this decline in Parliament mirrors the decline in our society, the decline of the centre, if you like, of politics, decline of the prevailing orthodoxy. It has shrunk in every way, and that's because it's hollow and has no real answer to the giant events that are occurring in our country and indeed in the world. That centre ground has failed. That's why new forces are bursting onto the scene with traction and with real possibilities of success. We're one of those.
So let's stay on that theme. I mean, the 4 months that followed your election victory in Rochdale, that can be a podcast and a series in and of itself, but we've got an election to talk about.
Yeah.
But let's talk about one particular incident that took place after your victory, and that was this emergency press conference by Sunak outside Downing Street, where he basically said our British democracy is under threat. Many, in fact, there's a near consensus that was in response to your by-election victory. What do you think the thinking was behind Mr. Sunak and the British establishment when you won the by-election in Rochdale in a landslide way that you did?
As it happens, I can tell you directly from the horse or the donkey's mouth, because in the corridors of the House of Commons, I challenged Rishi Sunak about this very event. One isn't supposed to report verbatim that conversations like that in the lobby, as it were, but suffice to say, I challenged him not on the morality of what he had done, but on the stupidity of what he had done. But he persuaded me that there was nothing stupid about it. And he's probably right. It's quite clear that this was the opening shot in an election campaign that was going to use Muslims as the whipping boy, the scapegoat, the target,
which we've seen
to
before.
Practice on. And we've seen before.
Yep.
But his purpose is to force Starmer either to come to the defense of the Muslims and therefore make his vulnerability to attacks from the right even greater, or, as is happening, the opposite.
Yep.
To force Starmer to join him in his attacks on the Muslims, and that was also the purpose of Michael Gove's cockamamie extremism initiative. And when he forces Starmer in that direction, he opens up even more ground for people like me and us to profit from the Labour Party's desertion of millions of Muslim voters. So he persuaded me that this was actually an intelligent move.
That would help you.
That would help me. And I think he's right, because all the signs are Starmer has dug in on his anti-Muslim positions, his anti-Palestinian positions, his apparent acceptance that Muslims and Islam are a problem in Britain. And he has done so with some gusto. If you see the way in which he's talking now about Gaza, he's decided that losing Muslim voters is, to quote Wes Streeting, one of his top lieutenants,
who is looking to
to succeed him, is shaking off the fleas. That's what he said. He called us fleas, and that Labour can afford to shake off those fleas because it will compensate, more than compensate, on the other side of the argument, that they'll be able to win people who might otherwise have been drawn to the Conservatives or drawn to Reform, UKIP, that kind of politics. Although that in turn will now have been confounded by Nigel Farage coming back into the race. But that was his game. And Sunak, there was method behind the madness, the apparent madness of coming out in the dark on a lectern that was too high for him, and making what were, on the face of it, extreme and extraordinary pronouncements about a democratic election, which we had just won in a landslide. It had never been done before. No one ever attacked the voters before for how they had voted in a democratic election, so it was extreme. But there was method behind it, and that's the method.
So let's talk about the two different sides of the same arse, right? Yesterday we had the televised debate, the first of the televised debate, which you were excluded from. First, let me get your thoughts on that. Your exclusion from these TV debates, but whilst having Reform, we'll have no MPs. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, if the next Prime Minister of Britain was on that stage last night, I hope it's Julie from ITV, because she actually made more of an impact than either of the contenders.
But there was the question that was asked by Omar from the audience about the genocide in Gaza, and you had Sunak applaud Keir Starmer for his response. They pretty much had the same policy.
Yes, and by the way, the aforementioned Julie turned Omar's question into an extraordinary, obscene actually, he asked about Gaza, and she said, what you mean is the terrorist atrocity that took place on the 7th of October and I quote, everything that unfolded thereafter. So 150,000 murdered and maimed Palestinian refugees, butchered in a cage from which they could not escape, becomes the events that unfolded thereafter. The fact that Starmer produced an answer that was so vile, Rishi Sunak applauded it, is a measure of this two cheeks formula that I developed a long time ago, long before Sunak and Starmer. Two cheeks of the same backside, tightly clenched. I don't want to upset your viewers by going further with that metaphor. I think they've probably already got my message. But the fact that on all the big issues, not just actually Israel-Palestine, but NATO, Russia, the big economic issues that face our people, that there's no money. I mean, they both said it last night, and she did. The host, money is incredibly tight. We know that, she said. And they agreed. But it isn't incredibly tight. We're spending billions upon billions on weapons, on war, and on preparing for new wars. And both parties stand for that. So, question is, will the public favour that kind of politics? And it seems to me that the worldwide trend now is to reject that kind of politics. Doesn't always break the way we would like it to break, but it breaks. So Meloni unseats the globalist centrists in Italy. Wilders does the same in the Netherlands. Le Pen will probably do the same this very week in the European Parliament elections in France. Sometimes it does break the way we would like. Sinn Féin, for example, are now the biggest party in Ireland, and the centrist blob is increasingly unpopular. But often it breaks in a different way, but it does break. So that's why I say that Yeats, W.B. Yeats, as we're talking about Ireland, said the centre is broken, it cannot hold. And this, I believe, is true and will be shown to be true by the results of this British general election too.
So let's look at this upcoming general election in light of your by-election victory. A term that was coined, became proliferated and normalised in a very quick space of time was sectarian politics, right? This is something which the mainstream media, the legacy media, right and left, coined this term, referring to the way in which Muslims appear to have organised, seem to be mobilising, whether they are talking explicitly about the Muslim vote national strategy or the way in which perhaps Muslim voters who are pro-Palestine voted for you in Rochdale. Do you think it's wrong for Muslims to have organised and mobilised the way that they have? Is it sectarian? Is it undemocratic? Is it un-British?
It is enormously overdue. It is something that in other countries has been the norm for 100 years. Why do you think every American presidential candidate has to discover a long-lost relative in Ireland? Because there's 30 million Irish Americans, and they've all got votes, and they don't give them away for nothing. And they need a commitment from any presidential candidate on matters that concern the Irish. This is the essence of democracy. People who have bonds in common and an agenda that they wish to see succeed, hold politicians to account. And the best way to do that is by standing firmly together, saying, in this case, we are 3 million British Muslims. We are as British as any British Christian or any British Jew, and we have interests. And democracy is about the allocation of resource, the allocation of decision-making the allocation of policy that reflects the demands of the electorate. So would it be sectarian for Scottish Catholics to insist that anyone asking for their vote would support the continued existence of Catholic schools?
Mm-hmm.
What's undemocratic about that? They have some interest in common, Catholic schools. There are people asking for their votes, and they're saying, you can't get our votes unless you make a promise that you will support our schools. That's not sectarian. It's the opposite of undemocratic. It is the practiced use of democracy to achieve legitimate ends. It's normal in every other country. The fact that it's only now happening in Britain is a criticism of the community that they did not do it earlier. Some, of course, did, but they gave their votes away very cheaply for a car park in the mosque or for an extension in the madrasa. But now people are saying, I think entirely selflessly, after all, none of the British Muslims are dying under the bombs in Gaza.
They're not.
Entirely selflessly, they said, if you want our votes, you have to pursue policies that will lead to justice for the Palestinians. I think they should be put on a pedestal and honoured for doing so. Not least because many of them come from places originally where there are multiple problems in their societies. A Kashmiri, for example, would have every right to say, don't bother me with Gaza. I'm actually trying to free Kashmir. But he doesn't. Kashmiri doesn't. He's on the streets shedding tears, actually, for Palestine, showing that for him, the idea of haqq is a universal one. And what's justified in demanding in Kashmir must also be demanded in Gaza. So we're late to the party, but we're getting organised now. And that's what worries them. That's why they attack it as sectarian, because it's working for the first time.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the Five Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair. This is not the first time where you have personally, for whatever reasons, for whatever variables was the reality at each given time you ran for office, Bethnal Green and Bowl, in a borough where there is a significant Muslim population. I mean, we're talking over a third, Bradford West, similar demographics. How important, George, and I'm asking this squarely and honestly, and not necessarily to even play to any particular audience. I mean, Five Pillars, we've created a conversation online about your by-election victory, and we were curious to ascertain. I mean, Robert was here shadowing you. He was there for the best part of a week, 2 weeks. How crucial is the Muslim bloc vote, that pro-Palestine Muslim bloc vote for the Workers' Party this general election?
Very important, and in some constituencies crucial. But we're standing hundreds of candidates.
326?
Yeah, which is a notional majority,
yep.
Which means you might be talking to the next Prime Minister. In many of those constituencies, there are hardly any Muslims at all, which doesn't mean there isn't much support for Palestine, because, as you know, most of the people on these great marches are not Muslim.
Yeah.
A point to which I shall return. I mean, my first parliamentary constituency was Glasgow Hillhead, Glasgow Kelvin it became. As you said in the introduction, there were hardly any Muslims there. But I still supported Palestine. I still supported Kashmir. The earliest video of me on YouTube is 1990 in Muzaffarabad in Kashmir, speaking for Kashmir, when I had no Kashmiri constituents at all. I fight for what's right, not for what's popular, still less for what's profitable. Most of the things I've stood for have been unprofitable, politically speaking. I'm joking that you're speaking to the next Prime Minister, but I might have gone much further in parliamentary politics if I had supported India and Israel rather than Pakistan and Palestine. Most people, I think, might acknowledge that, even those that hate me. So there's no opportunism involved, the very opposite of opportunism. But it's crucial in the seats that we're most likely to win. I'll grant you that. That is several in Birmingham, several in Greater Manchester, several in London, where Muslim voters are in very large numbers and are very well disposed towards us. But we're not running on a different policy in Whitehaven, where there are hardly any Muslims at all. We're running on the same policy there.
The Workers' Party has a 10-point plan,
Yeah.
a 10-point kind of manifesto.
Yeah.
I was looking into it, and it is, at least as simplistic as it may come across, it does cover social housing, regeneration in socioeconomically deprived areas, anti-imperialistic foreign policy and so forth. Are you saying that there is enough gravitational pull in those constituencies which isn't relying on a Muslim vote bloc, that you're confident that you'll see some good results there as well?
I don't know if we'll win. Of course, none of us know we'll win any seats at all. But we're more likely to win in areas with a large Muslim population.
Do you see yourself as a genuine or the even only alternative for real socialists?
Yes, our intention is to replace the Labour Party. If Mr. Benn, God rest his soul, was still alive, he'd be the leader of the Workers' Party, not me. We are the followers of Mr. Tony Benn. We are the adherents of his version of working class political representation. And we're 4 times bigger than we were 100 days ago. And if we make a parliamentary breakthrough, we'll be 4 times bigger and 4 times bigger than that, because the Labour Party is dying on its feet in terms of membership and activity. It's still a brand. Its main asset is that it is not the Tories. It doesn't actually have much love for it. Nobody's really moving out of love, to quote Shakespeare, for Keir Starmer. They're moving out of interest. That's why big business is now donating heavily to Keir Starmer, because their interests
How many
are
of
going
these
to be served.
how many of these disillusioned Corbynistas do you think are going to come to Workers' Party?
A lot. If I'm re-elected and Jeremy is re-elected, as you know, I think we sit next to each other in Parliament. We have done for almost 40 years. We talk in the most interminably boring parts of other people's speeches, sotto voce, in each other's ear, and we'll be sitting in the very same place if we're re-elected on the 5th of July. The day after the election, we'll be talking about who's won, who didn't, and what our new strength is. And I think you'll see after the election some important political realignments.
So there is some truth to the rumours that are circulating. There could be an emergence of a new left alliance?
I hope there is. Jeremy has declined to create one and lead one. I presume, I'm not quoting him, but I presume because he thought, even at the last minute, like Diane Abbott, he might be reinstated, and he'd definitely prefer that. But it hasn't happened, and so new conditions inevitably emerge.
George, why is that? Why is there this, whether it's Diane, whether it's Jeremy, whether it's even some, local members or those who want to run for lower office, this desire to still remain within the sphere of Labour? What is it? Even after the battering, the purge, the witch hunt, there's still this, I still want to be a part of this party. I still want to be within its spheres, knowing how the likes of Corbyn was treated and Diane and others.
It's a Stockholm syndrome. It's institutionalization, like an old lag that's due to be released from prison, but doesn't actually want to go out into the outside. It's that kind of mentality. I can say that with confidence because
Did you ever
I
struggle with
was one of them.
Did you ever struggle with that?
Yes.
How long did it last for?
When I was expelled from the Labour Party after 36 years of membership, and I was expelled in less than 36 seconds, I felt it like a stab in the heart, because I had spent all of my life until that point amidst my iconology, the vocabulary, the style of work of Labourism. I'd spent my whole life talking about comrade this, and I move acceptance of the standing orders, and you know what I mean. It was like the Stockholm bank vault, where they were all held, and began identifying with the man that was holding them, and I felt lost actually for some days after it, but only days, not weeks or months. And now that I look back on it, I'm embarrassed that I stayed in it for so long and had to be kicked out of it rather than leaving it. So that's how I can say with confidence that people like Jeremy and Diane and so on, it's like being excommunicated. It's like being kicked out of your church or your mosque. You may hate the people who are running the church and the mosque, and you may know that it's in your best interest to actually go somewhere else, but it still hurts. But we have to move beyond that, because it is now demonstrably, obviously clear that the Labour Party ain't coming back as a kind of Tony Benn, Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party. That's finished. So we have to try to make something new. And that's what we've been doing. We've existed only 4 years, but we quadrupled in 100 days. Big parties can become small, and small parties can become big. I could give you lots of examples, but time probably precludes it. But there are many examples, even in Europe, and even recently. I'll give you just one. François Hollande was the president of France as the leader of the French Socialist Party. The French Socialist Party doesn't now exist.
That's crazy.
But François Hollande is not ancient history. He's still around. He's still around. And his party isn't. PASOK in Greece. There are many, many examples. Big parties can become small. Small parties can become big.
So let's stay on Labour for now, because you've said it quite unequivocally that it's never going to return to that kind of radical pro-social justice, anti-imperialistic left, that those days have gone. What is then the policy? And I'm basing this on press conferences that you've done, recent endorsements and launches that you've done, that Labour has to be punished. So what is the strategy for voters whereby they have an MP who is Labour, who's pro-Palestine, whether it's Afsana Begum, Zara Sultana, or MPs that voted for a ceasefire? What do the voters do in that situation?
We must stop Keir Starmer being rewarded with the ultimate reward in British public life of moving into 10 Downing Street and becoming our Prime Minister. If you vote Labour, for anybody, in any constituency, you're voting to make Keir Starmer the Prime Minister. That would be entirely the wrong thing to do. It would be an unforgivable thing to do. And it would be an encouragement to them to continue doing the things they do. After all, if you pay no political price for doing bad things, why would you stop doing them? So from the punitive point of view, quite apart from any other, we must punish Labour by not voting for them, whoever their candidate is.
Irrespective of how pro-Palestine they are?
Irrespective, because you're not voting for them. You're voting for Starmer. I mean, this electoral system that we have, if you vote for someone like, say, John McDonnell, where we have a candidate against him, well, there are many things I could say about John McDonnell, but I won't for now. But the point is, if you vote for him, he's going to put Keir Starmer into number 10 Downing Street. And therefore, it is wrong morally to vote for him. or any other Labour candidate, because all you're doing is rewarding Starmer for supporting genocide. So we have a very strong line about this. But there's another reason, beyond the punitive, why you should not vote for any Labour candidate, and it is this. If you keep voting for quote-unquote good Labour MPs, they'll never leave Labour. And if they never leave Labour, you are merely preserving in aspic a state of affairs that most of us have long concluded now that needs to change. You have to break from the Labour mentality, and that is less likely to happen if you are still giving your votes to Labour MPs because you think that they have stood up for the right thing. Most of them have not actually stood up. Some of them have.
Very few.
But it's very few. It's easily countable on one hand. So 99% of them deserve the ash can of history.
Why didn't we see mass resignations from, forget about the pro-Palestine non-Muslim MPs. We're a Muslim outlet. Let's address the 17, 18, 19 Muslim MPs that we have, most of whom are Labour. Why didn't we see mass resignations, do you think?
Because they put their career in the Labour Party ahead of any obligation that they have to their own constituents, never mind to God.
Do you not buy the argument that we're more effective in the party than out of the party?
Well, it doesn't look like they're very effective inside the party, so that argument falls. But it falls for the greater reason also. Everybody has an obligation to do what they can to defeat evil, to strike it with their hand if they can, to curse it with their lips if they must, and curse it in their heart if that's all that they can do. Well, in the case of Muslim Labour MPs, they could do all three.
I choose not to.
And chose not to. And they chose not to for reasons of their own career. I've had the misfortune to know many of them up close and personal. I've even had the misfortune, I'm not going to admit who, to teach, to be a teacher of some of them, teaching them public speaking, teaching them how to get selected as candidates for councils and then parliament and so on. We have a crop of people who place their loyalty to Keir Starmer above their loyalty to anybody else. And that's unforgivable. Khalid Mahmood for Perry Barr not only signed an op-ed in the Observer newspaper on the Sunday before the invasion of Iraq. He didn't even write it. Dennis McShane wrote it. And Khalid Mahmood signed it, defending the invasion of Iraq. That's how low they go. They're prepared to put their name to a justification for what became a nightmare, which we're still living through, and they didn't even write it.
Let's touch upon those who went for lowly strategies, right? There's a bit of a digress, but I think it's relevant. Aaron Bastani, Novaro Media. I think just over a month ago, there was a clip that went viral on Twitter, and it became, once again, talk of the town online about George's views on homosexuality and same-sex relations in education. That interview podcast, did you know that he was going to ask you that question that was then going to be clipped out and then circulated? Did you know that he was going to ask you about same-sex relations and homosexuality?
I knew, of course, because they're an ultra-liberal outfit, that they would be pressing me on my anti-liberal views.
Because it's one of the editorial red lines, that is.
Yes.
The LGBT issue is one of the editorial red lines.
Yes. Yeah. What I didn't know, not a question of didn't know, what I was deceived about was that they would be publishing this material at the weekend rather than the night before the local elections, literally the night before. This was an act of clear deception. You may very well say, and you'd be right, to criticise me for accepting those assurances from such people. Never trust a liberal is what I've advised 1,000 people over decades, and I ended up trusting one myself. So I reproach myself only for that.
Did you know that there was going to be a disclaimer, like you may get triggered about the thing that I discussed?
No, actually I didn't. I was only told that this day. That's a kind of hysteria that these people go in for. Look, I'm a man of my age and class and religion. So I am formed in a way that you could call it prejudice in the sense that a prejudice is a preconceived belief.
Uh-huh.
It's not a negative thing. I've got a Stonewall Award for standing up for equality for gay people long before it became fashionable. I'm talking 30 years ago and more. So I am not homophobic in any sense if homophobia is defined as hating people for what they are.
Uh-huh.
But I have this prejudice. I don't want my children taught things in school on the moral and ethical level of which I disapprove.
So let's
call me a criminal, cart me away. I go on insisting that they're my children and not the state's, and that therefore their moral, ethical frame is the one that I set and their mother sets. I have 5 children in the school system. 5. The youngest of whom is 3. She's only in the nursery. But before long, she'll be being shown books and given material.
Under the RSC bill,
yes.
For primary schools,
Yes.
It's a statutory footing.
Yes. And it'll not be that long. I mean, you could say she's only 3, but by the time she's 6 or 7, she'll be beginning to be exposed to things I don't want her exposed to.
How mainstream do you think is that sentiment?
Well, that's what I was coming to.
Amongst Brits?
Novaro Media think this is a gigantic crime I've committed. But that's not what they think out on the street. And so one of the Zionist hit squads, Hope Not Hate,
Who have been leafleting in the area?
they're here now today, handing out leaflets.
Nick Lowell said that he's going to be doing it every day until election.
Yeah, calling me a transphobe. For what? Because I say a woman is an adult human female? Because I say a woman cannot have a penis? Because I say a man cannot have a cervix? And crucially, because I say no man will go into a public lavatory with my daughters.
Yeah.
They'll have to come past and through me first. Does that make me a transphobe? I don't think so. And I'm pretty sure most of the British public feel the same way. Muslim, non-Muslim, Christian, non-Christian, atheists, almost everybody in our society
Socialists?
feels that way. Not socialists. Because socialism has become captured by liberalism. I'm so old I remember when it was different. That's why you haven't yet called me left-wing. I reject the term left-wing. I am a socialist, but I'm not left-wing. Because left-wing means that you indulge all these California fads and accept them as if they were brought down by Moses as tablets of stone from Mount Sinai, and I will not do so. I insist on in opposing premature sexualization of my children and everyone else's children. I oppose the celebration of things that I myself do not celebrate because they're my children and not the state's. And that's all I said. I may have said it well or I may have said it badly, but if analysed, that's all I said. We're talking about children who should not, in any case, in my opinion, I see the government has begun to move in this direction, be subjected to sexual education at a premature age, in any case, whatever kind of sex they're teaching them. I say the government's begun to move, but they've only moved to 9 years old. Well, one of my sons is 9 years old. He's still a baby for me. I don't want him taught about sex by a stranger in a school on a curriculum that was written by someone else far away that I don't know and can never know and cannot properly object to. So, is it unpopular, what I said? Not so far.
Do you have any doubts that it was intentional by Novaro and Bastani in terms of the way it played out?
No, they absolutely, deliberately broke the undertaking that they made and clipped the most inflammatory, incendiary formulation that they could out of context. And so that tells me what they are, who they are. Something I had long suspected, but I'm now very much clearer about.
Hold up, the show will continue. But before it does, I want to remind you all that the Blood Brothers podcast is the fastest growing English language Muslim podcast in the world. When we deliver unique quality content to you week after week, brothers and sisters and friends, it requires money. So please click the link in the description and support this project however you can. Back to the show. Bringing the podcast to a close, let's talk about the upcoming general election, the Workers' Party, as a force for an alternative for the British people. Let's talk about immigration and foreign policy. As part of your 10-point plan, one of the early points mentioned in the kind of 10-point manifesto is withdrawing membership from NATO. Now, many of your critics would say at this present time, right now, with the Ukraine happening, with politics within Europe becoming more polarized, you're actually leaving Britain in an unsafer position by withdrawing membership from NATO, and you're actually strengthening China and Russia, Russia primarily.
Well, I think the opposite. I think that our membership of NATO and NATO's conduct is endangering British people. We are hurtling towards confrontation with Russia over Ukraine that has the risk of existential wipeout for the human race, has the risk of nuclear war in the European continent. And that is a very, very dangerous place to be. And we may be very close to an outbreak of hostilities. I hope not, but the Russians believe we are, and they are organizing their defenses accordingly. They clearly believe that there's about to be the intervention of NATO forces, primarily American forces, because we don't have that many forces.
And now that we are in the situation that we are in, let's put aside the policy decisions that were made by Rishi Sunak and the Conservative government in getting behind Ukraine at the behest of America and their geopolitical interests in Europe. Now that we are where we are, is it unwise to withdraw from NATO?
Well, of course, that would require us to be in power, us to be in government, so it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. But the existence of a military war machine, a military alliance that was predicated on the existence of a socialist bloc led by the USSR, none of which still exist, is, as a matter of simple logic, otious, redundant. And it's an organization looking for work, looking for something to do. It's on mission creep. It has chosen the people of Ukraine to be the ultimate mission creep, and it may end up destroying us all. But let's say we get past the Ukraine thing. Who are we going to fight next? China over Taiwan? Are we going to fight Russia and China? We're going to fight Russia, China, and Iran? Are we going to have NATO in the Mediterranean firing guns at those that are at war with Israel? It's war after war after war. And NATO's footprint is in them all. So we believe, not in a defenseless Britain. I was a boy soldier myself. I almost joined the Royal Marines. I believe in defence.
Do you believe in a nuclear Britain?
Well, we've got it and can't disinvent it. So we are not amongst those that are in any way imagining that unilateral nuclear disarmament by Britain is going to change the picture in the world. And actually, I've never believed that, even when the Soviet Union and so on did exist. If we're going to have nuclear rockets, let's at least point them both ways and defend ourselves against any and all who might attack us. But the even use of the term defend ourselves is kind of a misnomer, because as soon as you fire them, you cease to exist, because whoever you fired them at has far more nuclear weapons than you do and will crush you into ash. So we are against nuclear weapons, of course, but it's not that we are immediately campaigning against. It's the fact that someone like Joe Biden or someone like Donald Trump can drag us into a war that might mean the end for all of us. And the best way to avoid that is to be an independent country with our own defences and with an absolute determination to defend our island and our legitimate interests, I stress legitimate interests. But a Britain that's navy is in the Red Sea, pounding Yemenis, rather than in the English Channel, where most British people would prefer it was, defending our own borders, that's in the Black Sea, it's in the South China Sea, it's in every sea except our own seas. This is not defending our legitimate interests. When I was 14 years old, one of my most vivid memories, Scottish troops were gunning down Yemenis in Aden, in the Crater district in Aden. Now that I'm almost 70, we're still gunning down Yemenis.
Crazy.
Yeah. This imperial hubris is one of our principal problems as a people, as a country. I come from an Irish background. Once I came home and told my Irish grandfather that our teacher, Mr. Brown, had told us that Britain had had an empire so vast that upon it the sun never set. And my grandfather answered, that's because God would never trust the British in the dark.
That's a good one. Look, the 10-point plan, NATO, and ethical foreign policy, and all of this only becomes realistic if the Workers' Party get as many MPs on July the 4th as possible. How are you dealing with the situation where it is taking place, whether it's with Craig Murray in Blackburn, whether it's in Luton South and many other places, where there is a split vote situation, where there's going to be 2 or even 3 pro-Palestine candidates? How are you dealing with the situation whereby in some constituencies, the Muslim vote have endorsed your candidates, Jodie McIntyre and others?
Myself.
Well, yourself, of course, primarily. But then there's other constituencies where the Muslim vote haven't endorsed a candidate, where there's also Workers' Party. How are you dealing with this situation?
Well, we're trying our best. I myself was a strong supporter of Mr. Akanji in Bethnal Green, even a donor to his campaign. And yet I made a video yesterday congratulating him on standing down, and Mr. Masroor, who's now the agreed candidate, giving my support to him. So we are trying, and we have stood down in quite a number of constituencies, nearly 100, where independents say and argued that they had a better chance than us. But there has to be a bit of a law of the sea about this. If your candidate is Craig Murray, and he's already in the field, he's already got an office and an ad van, and he's already put leaflets out, and he's a big international figure, and the Workers' Party is a significant political player, and then somebody emerges from a solicitor's office that you've never heard of before and says, hey, I'm a local independent. There has to be a bit of the law of the sea about this. Mm-hmm. And we're insisting on it in Blackburn, but in other places where it's a more debatable, if you like, set of circumstances, we've done our best to accommodate. So Leanne Mohammed, for example, the Palestinian woman in Ilford, we were delighted to stand down for her. We would hope that she would join the Workers' Party if elected, but of course that's a matter for her. Ditto in Newham, we're supporting Sophia Nakvi, one of my best friends in politics. She's standing as an independent, and there are others.
Let me get your thoughts on Stratford, I think it's Stratford and Bow, where you've got the Revolutionary Communist Party candidate, the very articulate student who had a GB News debate with Suella Braverman, running against Halima Khan and Workers' Party. How are you dealing with these situations?
Well, I'm very suspicious about that.
Because she's pro two-state solution. The revolutionary, I think the Revolutionary Communist Party is of the two-state solution thinking.
Oh no, absolutely. They even put the J word on it, that it's going to be a Jewish state. Well, we don't believe in Jewish states, obviously, least of all on somebody else's land. But we are very suspicious about that candidature. This young woman has come from nowhere, being given all these platforms. And we've got all kinds of people endorsing someone who's standing for something called the Revolutionary Communist Party. Who knew that something called the Revolutionary Communist Party could be so mainstreamed and so tolerated quite so quickly? Halima Khan, on the other hand, didn't come from anywhere yesterday. She was a central whistleblowing figure in the Labour files, which revealed, thanks to Al Jazeera, the most foul conspiracies against Jeremy Corbyn, which eventually brought him down and destroyed the whole Corbyn phenomenon. And Halima Khan was an insider inside the Labour HQ who blew the whistle and helped Al Jazeera make the Labour files. She's not in favour of partitioning the small land of Palestine into a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. What a terminology that all is. We believe in one democratic state between the river and the sea, where Jews, Muslims, Christians and others can live as equals under the law. That's our policy. That's the Revolutionary Communists' policy. I know which one I think most people will prefer.
How has it been engaging with the Muslim vote? I say this to you because for the first time in many years, it appears a new generation of Muslim voters are organising, will be mobilising. This is the very early stages of something that could potentially be a serious force in the future. How has it been, dealing with the Muslim vote behind the scenes? And of course, tell me as much as you're able to tell me, right? In terms of this whole candidacy issue in certain constituencies where there's a split vote, multiple candidates, how has it been?
Well, the key phrase that you used is how much I'm able to tell you. I'll be able to tell you more after the election than I'm able to tell you right now. Perhaps if I put it this way, I hope the new young elements that have come in take their place in the leadership of the Muslim vote as soon as possible, because you have great potential here. I read a tweet yesterday from the United States in which AIPAC congratulated themselves thus: all 17 of the AIPAC-backed, endorsed candidates yesterday won their primary elections.
Outrageous.
17 out of 17.
From the rooftops.
The entire political class is owned by an ideology. Most of them are not Jews, by the way. An ideology, pro-Israel ideology, now owns the vast majority of members of Congress. and the White House, Joe Biden, has received $11 million from AIPAC. $11 million. Now, I don't know what the percentage of Jews is in America, of Jews plus evangelical Christians is in America, but I'm willing to bet it's less than the percentage of Muslims in Britain. My point being, Muslims in Britain should be politically very powerful. Everyone should have to take into account and give regard to the demands of, the wishes of the Muslim voters in Britain, but they are not, as evidenced by the Birmingham Hodge Hill example that I gave you. 46,000 Muslim voters in Hodge Hill, but their Labour MP chooses to join the Labour Friends of Israel. What is this except contempt? We need to change that. You can change it. But the Muslim vote has to act rationally. It's not just a question of who knew whom when, or what favour somebody did back in the days. It has to be cold, calculated, political science. You have to say, we can influence 5,000 votes in this constituency, so which of you candidates who are running can satisfy us on our key demands? And by the way, where you can't, please make an explanation as to why you can't. If you did that, you would begin to have a measure of influence over British political developments that you A, deserve in democratic terms because of numbers, and in terms of good, haq, everybody would be stronger, because through cold, rational political science, the Muslim vote was exercising that kind of influence and authority. And too many old thinking, not about old or young, old thinking decisions are being made. But you're doing better than you've ever done, and that's got to be progress. But you have to do, and can do, better yet.
I will close this interview with what many would be already be asking whilst watching this. They've made it this far. Is some of an elephant in the room. There'll be many who would want to vote for Workers' Party. There'll be many who, and when I say many, I'm talking about many Muslims, who would agree with the Workers' Party's approach to the genocide in Gaza, the occupation of Palestine, having a more ethical foreign policy and so forth. But there is this hesitation, reluctance, reservation, perhaps, with regards to your personal political positions on other issues. Syria, Russia, the Uyghurs. And there will be those, right, who will be thinking, well, hold on, the Workers' Party are on point here, or George's, this speech here was on point, but X, Y, and Z. And even you and I have had these differences. We still have those differences. Even before we pressed record, we spoke very briefly about those differences, which for many would be a major thing. What would your comments be to those Muslims who may want to vote for Workers' Party, but are hesitant, reluctant, or are unconvinced because of your personal positions on the said issues, like Uyghurs and the Syrians and stuff like this?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I recognise that there are differences, and I respect them, and I honour those who have a different point of view to me on, for example, the issues you mentioned, and with whom I've travelled far, even literally, on the road to Gaza with our convoys, on the road to Baghdad with our Red London bus in 1999. I've literally travelled long with people who disagree with me strongly on the issues that you gave as an example. So I honour them, I respect them. I would merely ask them to ponder this, that this year, in this election, in 2024, when children are being beheaded in Gaza, when their mothers are being amputated, when the blood of the Palestinian people is running like rivers, and we are all together in opposition to it, if we cannot, not forget, but at least place to one side our differences on these matters or any other that we have, and come together for Palestine, come together for Jerusalem, which is right now under attack. There's thousands of settlers in Al-Aqsa right this minute as we speak. And who knows what's going to happen when we switch our phones back on. If we can unite around the holy cause of Palestine, in which I have spent 50 years of my life, 50, and on which you agree with me, give us your support this time. We can discuss the other issues. We may persuade each other. I may change my mind. You may change your mind. But let's punish Labour for its complicity in the genocide of the Palestinian people. I believe that's what God would want us to do. And I think that that's what we should do. And moreover, I think that's what people will do. I don't think they want to see Keir Starmer rewarded for what he's done because they disagree with me on other matters.
George, it was an absolute pleasure having you on.
I enjoyed it.
And I wish you all the best for July the 4th.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All minds.
It's always exciting ahead.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed today's podcast as much as I did. There is a lot to go through and think about and to reflect upon. And I hope it was of benefit to you in terms of making your decision for July the 4th. If you like this episode, do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. And of course, if you're an avid podcast listener, you can find on all the major audio platforms. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.